Hi, welcome to another edition, hand-laid tracks and 3D printed trains with Socrates. Today we're taking a look at how to build a curved track. I came up with a simple curved jig to make the curved tracks. It's got your grooves for the two rails and a tie every fifth tie on the plastic sleepers. There's 5 sleepers and then a soldered PCB board that holds everything together by soldering the two halves together. And you have to make sure that is gapped and a cut is made between the copper, otherwise you'll have a dead short. So basically you put your little gapped PCB boards inside the cross slots, the short slots, and the long rails down the end, and you solder it together and you have yourself a piece of railroad track. This is N scale track and it's kind of comes out quite nice. I then 3D printed a tie bed to go behind it, glue it together with plyo bond or any sort of contact adhesive, and you got yourself a piece of N scale track. I use a standard cutting end on the end to make it join together with the other pieces. Just like that, you got yourself part of a train set. Here's a quick little video of me putting it together. You can get the jigs themselves. I have them for the 9-inch, the 10-inch, and the 12-inch. They're on Thingiverse. There's also a 6-inch because when I originally made the 12-inch, I was thinking diameter, not radius, and ended up making one that's only 6 inches, which is kind of cool for trolleys, I suppose. I don't think I made the tie bed for that. The ties are a lot more work than the jigs themselves are relatively easy, but the 9, 10, and 12-inch are available on Thingiverse. Download them, print them yourself, and make yourself some curved tracks. All you need is some rails, and I use micro engineering rails. And I use the PCB boards. I got them from Fast Tracks, but Clover House also sells them. And it's nice to make your own tracks. This one took me about, I think, 30 minutes in total, but I went kind of slow. Thanks for watching. Check it out on Thingiverse, and here's a little video of me actually making a track. Okay, so this is the quick version of my building this thing out. It's a curved piece of track, so I had to use my rail roller, which I also designed. These things are available in various ways. I built this myself. It's a fun thing to design. I'll put it up on Thingiverse at some point. And when you're doing it, it's better to go slowly to the rail curve because I went a bit quick here, and after the second curve I had it overly tight. So I had to straighten the rail back out to get it to the proper curve. And that's not really a big deal except for the fact that if I did it right slowly, then the second rail would have been set up right away. As it was, it took me a while to get that second rail because now I was being cautious because I messed up the first rail, made it too tight, so now I'm going at it slowly, and it took me a while to carefully get that rail to the right curve. Although it's quite a satisfying thing, the rail roller, it gives you a nice piece of curve. It's a nice consistent curve, and still relatively quickly I ended up with 2 pieces of nicely curved rails. And then you need to put the cross ties in. I use the Fast Tracks PCB boards. They're pre-cut to width and they're basically long. And I have a tie cutter and gapper, which is already on Thingiverse, which is a really great tool because making the ties is a massive pain if you don't have a tool to make it easy. With the tie cutter and gapper, allows you to cut them all to length and then put that little tiny notch in the middle all at once, which is a huge time saver because otherwise you'll end up with a dead short between the two of them. And this particular jig I've used a bunch of times already, and so I had to pick off a bit of plastic that melted from one of the times I did it. And cleaning off the end of the rails real fast. When you have to put I'm using rail joiners at this point between the pieces, and to slide the rail joiner in is a bit tough. So if you kind of bevel the edges a little bit and knock off the corners, it's much easier to slide the rail joiners in. And I use the triple gauges, the 3-point gauges, and I use 3 of them. Not only do they hold the rails in the proper separation so they're engaged, which is critical, but it also gives you something to push down on because when I'm doing this, I put a little bit of solder onto the tip and then a little bit more at the joint, and then I heat it a second time and push down on something, usually that 3-point, because it's so very convenient. It sits on top of the rails. And so it's a process of tiny bit of solder on the tip of the soldering gun, a bit more once you're in position, because that little bit of solder helps the solder to flow onto the ties, because you can end up with a blob of solder that's only on the gun, at which point I'll wipe the whole thing off on the sponge and start again basically. And in between most of the solder joints, I try to wipe the tip off on the sponge when at all possible. I also found that it's much better to do one rail at a time, so I always work on the closest side of the jig. I used to do it on both sides and solder from the other side, but there's no reason to do that. Spin the jig around and make the soldering joint easier for yourself. But especially on a curve, I'll do the one side first and then do the second side, making sure that the gauge, usually from the middle first, and make sure the rails are in proper gauge alignment, because otherwise you'll end up with a major problem. You'll end up with badly running trains and derailments, etc. And once you've got all the ties soldered in and you're sure they're all soldered in nicely, double check it with the little, I have a little piece of one coupler, and you can check it with your gauges and make sure it's okay. And I also then use the small screwdriver. The flat screwdriver is the way I found easiest to get these things out, because if you do a good job with the soldering, it's not nearly a problem. At first, obviously, I wasn't as good at this, and I tended to melt the jig more often. But by slipping that screwdriver into the round end of the jig, you can sort of get a little bit of pry up and get a couple different points where it pries, and then slide the whole screwdriver in, and you can generally pop it off. And just like that, you've got a nice piece of track, and you can combine it with the tie bed, the printed tie bed with plyo bond, and just like that, another piece of track is ready for the layout. So I hope you liked watching it, and find it on Thingiverse, download it yourself, print it, and you can make it to make your own tracks in your at least 9, 10, and 12 inch or 6 inch curves. At this point, I have a really small layout. It's only a 2 by 4 inch layout, so I don't have space for bigger curves, so I haven't made any of them as well. But enjoy it. Hope you liked it. Download it, enjoy, and I'll see you again next time. Yeah, I know, it's getting dark already. What are you going to do? Hey, Las and Pindicas.